like I guess I'm thinking you're seeing a lot of different people, some of whom say like baseball players, golfers may kind
Gotcha.
of tend to be a certain way just based on the things they do. And then
Yep.
they're coming in, they may be in pain. You start to unravel some of the layers and see the changes. Like, do
Mhm.
you see patterns trend a certain way based on who's kind of coming in the door?
Yeah, I mean, it's depending. So if you've got someone specific, like a pitcher, right? There's going to be certain things that they measurements that they need that are super important with regards to like layback and but then we also have to take into account is how do they produce their given motion, right? So, you know, if I got a gen pop person that comes in pain, I'm just going to take them. I'm going to try to create as much space behind them as possible without robbing the front because it just makes people more comfortable. It's easier just to get some buy-in, and then we can kind of see how far we can push them forward. You know, you take a pitcher, you take or a force producing athlete, you take them too far back, you rob them of their power. Typically, you just move them too far away from their force producing capabilities. And also, you can have some injury risk stuff too, like there too. I mean, so man, it depends. I tend to look a lot more like at ratios of range of motion versus just gross numbers, and then getting to know someone over time. Uh, Depending because the more I get to measure, the more I get to try to interventions with them and try like mini like 1 week programs with them and see what it does to their range of motion. That tells you a lot of what we can alter. And then looking at like being comfortable as a PT or strength coach is looking at the dynamic movement of their sport. People don't do that enough. That's the majority of what I will do now because it's all well and good to get things clean on the table, but how much does it actually relate to what's the missing link between this and then what they're doing on the mound or standing over a golf ball.
How are some ways you're looking at these ratios? I'm assuming between ERs and IRs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming you're looking at some type of gradient between those. So why is that so important to you? And how does that fit in terms of like your treatment model?
Yeah, so I mean, take the two extremes, right? So take someone who's more cylindrical. They're going to need they're going to in order for them to produce a certain amount of force or get the club head where they want or get their hand where they want, whatever implement they've got in their hand to get where they want. That narrow cylindrical guy is just going to need more time. Uh, they're going to need a larger gradient between their ERs and IR. Like they're going to need larger separation between the two. They're going to have larger separation, right? You're going to see, for example, if it's a golfer, you're going to see a more vertical shaft at the top of the golf swing. If it's a pitcher, maybe they're going to have almost like a later layback. Maybe if it's like a base, if it's a hitter, like you're going to see a later lay down of the bat, those sort of things, versus someone who's wider, who doesn't have that expand. They don't need the gradient because they can produce the force here, but they need to just get enough that they can create enough turn. They can pull the rubber band just enough that they can let go of it. Your wider guys are going to be almost like they'll take it back on playing so that you won't see a ton of excursion through that transition. That same thing with hitters, same thing with pitchers. Pitchers, like the pitcher, maybe that better thought of like for the pitchers isn't necessarily like the timing of the layback, but more like their attack angle down the mound. So I think of a narrow person when they get set and they get to the top of their delivery. A narrow guy almost needs to have that feeling that they're going to drop into a half pipe. If you drop into a wave, if you ever surfed before, that's that first vertical drop. And then they need to be able to ride a little bit of IR versus the wide doesn't necessarily need to drop as much. They can just sort of, you get a little bit of drop, but then they have to ride the longer position of IR. So it's just too like, and there's an infinite amount of people in between, but it just gives you a model of like, okay, this person is pretty narrow and I'm not seeing them like they get on their right foot, their knee turns out right away and they have no internal rotation in that system that where you'd want it. And now they're moving left. The only way that they're going to move left is they're going to do like a spinal IR compression. That's going to squeeze them, move them that way. It doesn't mean you can't be fast. It doesn't mean you can't throw a ball really hard, but it's going to be limiting over time, I think.